Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Courtney Cohn, and today I'm sitting down with Eugene DePasquale, who is the Democratic candidate for Attorney General in Pennsylvania, which is one of the states right now with the most voting rights and elections cases. Let's get started. Welcome, Eugene DePasquale, to Democracy Docket. Thank you for joining us.
Courtney, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Now, first, I just want to start by asking you, why are you running to be the Attorney General of Pennsylvania?
Look, I believe in this particular moment, we need someone that has a record of holding bad actors accountable, someone that has the ability to win a statewide election, someone that has a record of protecting Pennsylvanians in every single county, whether it be reproductive freedom, whether it be taking on pollution, corporate misdeeds, whether it be prescription drug prices, and certainly keeping our community safe from the work I've done in public safety. And so that's why I'm running.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going further and more specific, can you talk about why you are so passionate about protecting democracy and how you would want to protect democracy and voting rights as Attorney General?
So to be blunt, this is the whole ballgame here. Look, if we don't have our democracy, so many other things go away. And so to me, this is, look, I've got two kids. They're younger, 24 and 21. I love our country. I love our world. And to me, this is what I could do to help step up and make sure that we are not only doing the job of Attorney General and protecting the community, taking on corporate back actors, punishing anyone that tries to scam our seniors, but certainly protecting our democracy.
Yeah. And, democracy especially came under threat during and after the 2020 election. That's when a lot of this started and really kicked up. And, as you know, the Attorney General at the time, Josh Shapiro, who's currently the state's governor, went to court numerous times to fight off Trump and other Republicans trying to interfere with or overturn the 2020 election results. So can you talk about, how you would address similar situations after the 2024 election or after future elections, things like that?
So I've already done some work on protecting our elections in Pennsylvania. I investigated our voter registration database. And it's through my recommendations, we actually made that system more secure, helping lead to the 2020 election being our most secure election in Pennsylvania history. So I already have a record of protecting our democracy. Certainly we saw what happened in 2020 with all the lawsuits. As Attorney General, my job isn't to pick the winner. My job is to make sure who the voters pick actually gets upheld, to make sure that anyone that legally cast a ballot gets that vote counted, that the voters' will gets ratified. That's my job, and certainly that's what I will do as your Attorney General.
Right. And, something that you will likely face is all of these voting rights and election court cases. I mean, currently, Pennsylvania is one of the states with the most cases like this, and there have been a lot of rulings recently. Like last week, a judge in Butler County said that voters in that county can't cure defective ballots that are missing inter secrecy envelopes, right, known as naked ballots. And so what is the impact of rulings like this, and what would you do to mitigate this?
So there are areas where the law, I may disagree with the law, but as Attorney General, I can't make the law. I can only enforce it. So some of these things are in the law, and my job and the job of others is to inform voters as to the various rules that are in there. So for example, the lack of a date, to me, the postmark should be the issue. Okay. But it is in the law, and the courts have basically said that, whether we agree with it politically or not, that's in the law. So our job is to make sure that the voters know that is in there. Where my job comes in, if someone does date it and they still try to challenge it because they say, oh, the signature doesn't, completely match what's on their voter registration, but you can see it's very similar. That's where I come in and say that vote's got to count.
Yeah. And what do you say to citizens or voters who are scared that their votes won't be counted, or scared that they don't know what the proper process is to make sure their votes do get counted?
To me, look, there's going to be various how-to, whether it be on YouTube or the Department of State is going to put this information out there on how to cast your ballot by mail. And a lot of people have done this. Look, I try not to get people too panicky on this. If you cast your ballot, then you put it in the secrecy envelope, obviously sign it and date it, your vote will get counted as long as it arrives on time. But if you have any nervousness about that, go to your polling place and cast your vote. And all of these issues go away. And again, the vote by mail is there for people to have the option. But but if people are uncomfortable with that and they can make it to their polling place on election day, then do that.
Right. And I think this is like a big discussion that's being had on, how to vote, what's the best way to vote, all these type of things. And so do you think that there needs to be more education on this subject?
There is absolutely no question. And I know there's going to be the various political parties, certainly as a Democrat. I know a lot of emphasis from the Democratic Party is going to go out on this. I think there's a lot of independent groups, whether they be conservative or liberal aligned, and some other various nonprofit groups. I'm sure like the Committee of 70 out of Philadelphia, which is very nonpartisan. I know there's going to be a huge emphasis as we go into September on educating people on how to do this.
Yes. And, I think that that's a big concern that voters have is like, how do I vote? And is my vote getting counted? But another concern that I think a lot of people have expressed is like threats of physical violence. I know that recently Governor Shapiro established an election hotline in Pennsylvania for voters and election workers to report any threats of violence, which is beneficial for voters. But the fact that that even had to be established is, unfortunate, of course. So how do you seek to address these increased threats of physical violence to voters and candidates and election workers? And how do we make voters comfortable to vote?
Right now, I'm a candidate, so my job would be just like any other citizen, is report to the appropriate authorities that the governor's outlined, because I know the governor is not going to accept any of this at any polling place. And look, most of our election people, look, they may be a Republican, they may be a Democrat, but if you've been to a polling place, most of these people are doing this on behalf of, they just believe it's their job as being, a good citizen to try to help our election process. The actual judges of election in these areas, most of them are not part of this, effort to try to, threaten our democracy. So they're trying to do the right thing too. And they have various protocols that have been put in place, in case there's any threats. If and when I am your attorney general, then my job is to work with the state police, with local law enforcement, and the judges of elections and county commissioners, which make up the election board, to make sure that I'm doing my part to help supplement whatever help they need.
Right. And so, you had mentioned this earlier, but you already have experience, working at the state level on these type of issues. So can you talk about how your experience as Pennsylvania Auditor General and also as a state legislator help prepare you for the huge role of Attorney General? So
for starters, as the Auditor General, I've already run a complicated state agency. I've led the legal department there. And in addition to that, I led tough investigations all over the state. I led to punishing and holding people accountable that were committing bad acts. It was my investigation that found over 3,000 untested rape kits. Working together with my team, we cleared that backlog and we brought justice to victims. It was my investigation that found 58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. Any single one of those calls could have been life or death for a child. But it wasn't enough for myself and my team to find that problem. I went to every single county, making sure the child protection workers had the tools they needed to make sure our children were better protected. And when it came to reproductive freedom, the women of Pennsylvania that were going to these crisis pregnancy centers were basically being lied to by this organization called Real Alternatives. It was actually using Pennsylvania tax dollars to lie to pregnant women about what their reproductive rights were and what would happen to them. They would lie to them about what would happen to them if they chose various paths. Well, my investigation exposed them for the frauds they are, and it led to Governor Shapiro canceling that contract, basically punishing them for lying to women. And that's some of the work I've already done as your Auditor General. And as Attorney General, I would just take it to the next level. Not only protect people from violent crime and hold and punish people that commit violent acts, but also take on corporate polluters, take on anyone that's trying to scam our seniors, take on the student loan industry if they're trying to gouge our students across the state, and certainly take on the people trying to price gouge us when it comes to prescription drugs.
Yeah. And continuing on to your other state experience, you were a legislator as well. Can you talk about how that experience, may help you as Attorney General, for example, if you need to work with legislators to accomplish goals, things like that?
So for starters, I was on the Judiciary Committee. So in my experience, it's very similar to that of now the former Attorney General, now Governor Shapiro, and that is, prior to entering this office. So our background is very similar. Now, we both served on the Judiciary Committee together. So for starters, being in the legislature helps let you know what the actual policy goals of many of these laws are. So as Attorney General, you're enforcing something that the legislature has already done. But it also helps me with relationships across the aisle. If there is something that I feel is a gap in a law, again, I can't enforce a law that doesn't exist. But if there is additional tools that I need as Attorney General to make sure I'm protecting the state better, then I can certainly work with allies on both sides of the aisle to try to get those additional tools so I can be even more effective at my job.
Yeah, and going off of that, bipartisanship obviously has been an issue that's been discussed frequently at the national level, at the state level, of how does it still exist? How do we, try to allow it to prosper? So can you talk about how you would push for bipartisanship and how you would try to get things done across the aisle in a time when things are so divisive?
Look, the Philadelphia Inquirer endorsed me in the primary because they said, particularly in these polarized, I'm paraphrasing here, partisan polarized times, we need a chief prosecutor of the state who isn't a partisan warrior. Like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a proud Democrat, but more importantly, I'm a Pennsylvanian, and I'll enforce the law evenly across the board. I was tough and fair on a Republican governor as Auditor General. I was tough and fair on a Democratic governor. And I know that's earned me, probably some people angry at me on both sides of the aisle, but it also has earned me a lot of friends on both sides of the aisle. And I will utilize that as Attorney General to drive the change that's needed in the legislature and in laws to make sure that I can, do even a greater job of protecting the public.
Yeah. And in addition to all of those priorities that you have, how will you work to ensure that people's voting rights are being protected? People, especially in certain minority groups who historically and presently are really being threatened and, oftentimes aren't being represented in our government.
Look, we have a lot of allies on this. First of all, we have good Pennsylvania laws on allowing people to vote. So we have that. We have vote by mail. We have vote in person. And you can even drop it off at the drop box. Now, some counties are more accessible than that and others. But we have more voter options now than we've had in the vast majority of Pennsylvania history. So that's good. We also have a lot of protections for people. We also have an ally in the governor's office. The state police, he is the leader of that organization. So the reason why I bring that up is that if any danger happens in any polling place, he can deploy those resources to make sure voters, no matter who they're voting for, get the protection they need to cast that ballot. So you have vote by mail. You can drop it off at a drop box. Certainly the education needs to be done on informing people that have questions about how to do that. And you can vote in person. All of those options exist. And as Attorney General, my job is to make sure that those laws are enforced so that people that legally want to cast a ballot get to cast that ballot.
What would you say to people, and specifically, we've seen this a lot more on the Republican side, but people who are saying, well, vote by mail causes fraud and causes, an untrustworthy election. How do you plan to kind of dispel a lot of those myths that have been spread and people casting doubt on our election system?
All of us can do is tell the truth, and that is it's safe and reliable. Our Pennsylvania election system is safe and reliable. And look, the people, for example, like, a Doug Mastriano, who the voters obviously sent him a lesson, which is he lost his governor's race by 15 points. They're going to continue to say what they're going to say. But for the rest of us, just keep telling the truth and let people know what their options are, how to vote, legally cast that ballot, then the vote will get counted, and then the voters will be ratified.
Yes, the truth is incredibly important. And I think, as long as people continue to spread that, we can, rebuild trust in elections. Definitely. Exactly. So I want to end this interview on more of a fun, light question. So I know that you grew up in Pittsburgh, and I saw that you are a Steelers fan. So I wanted to ask you if you have any predictions for the upcoming NFL season.
So, look, the champs are the champs until someone knocks them off. I'm never going to bet against Patrick Mahomes. He is incredible to watch. I certainly think the Eagles are, in my opinion, the greatest threat to them in the whole NFL. So I'm going to give this prediction. I think it'll be the Chiefs against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. My Steelers, sometimes this gets me in political trouble. I just don't think they are Super Bowl ready yet. We're not even sure who's going to be our quarterback yet. So I think, again, until someone proves me otherwise, the Chiefs are the team to beat in the AFC. Eagles are the team to beat in the NFC. I think there's some teams that can give them a run for their money, but I think the Eagles are the better team. And then come back to me in the middle of the season when every team is decimated by injuries, and then I'll give you a new opinion.
All right, I'm definitely going to have to follow up with you on that because people listen to your political opinions, but they may want to listen to your football opinions as well.
Yeah, well, look, if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt in the first week, then that changes my opinion on the Chiefs making the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's okay. I won't hold you to it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eugene, for joining us today here at Democracy Docket. We really appreciate it.
Courtney, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching the latest video in our Candidate Q&A interview series. If you want to stay up to date on all things voting rights and election news, subscribe to our free daily and weekly newsletters now. See you next time.